All right. Did everybody get a chance to read the passages?
I didn't get the homework until this morning.
Okay, no worries. Did you read over them? I know you had appointments this morning, so it's okay if we do not read them.
I didn't get to read it.
I'm making sure everybody's here. Awesome. Okay. No, that's totally fine because we're going to review it. I think it'll be interesting for those that did do it. I think you'll just see you have your previous answers.
I got the first one done, but I was working on the last class since I signed up late, so I didn't finish my second one.
No worries. I try to do, like, if I have 2 classes in one day, I try to do less homework for one of the classes, but it's hard if you sign up late because then that's just a lot for either. Okay. So what we're going to do today is, for those of you that were not at my first LR class, that's totally okay. Today we're going to focus more on the questions and less about reading to comprehend. But I am going, since a lot of us haven't read it, I am going to break this into groups to read the passage first, the first passage. But I want to make sure that we put people in groups that were here last time. And so we have Derek joining. So we can put Derek and Gina in a group, and Cora and Angelica. Let's see who else knows.
I don't see Derek.
He just joined, and Jaylene was not here, but Jaylene would know how to do it, so we can put her in a group too. So, Angelica, I'm gonna put you in your own group, and put Cora and Jaylene together.
Okay.
And then other people in. So what we're going to do first is we're going to break into smaller groups, and we're going to do what we did last time about just reading the passage, and we're going to go paragraph by paragraph. And if we only get to one of the passages today, that's okay. But we're going to take hopefully like 5 to 6 minutes to do this before we answer it. If you can walk your group through how to approach it a little bit, if we have questions for those that were here before, that would be great.
Okay.
Just since this is not the focus of today's class.
Which one do you want us to do?
76.
Okay.
I actually sent it, people that signed up for the class, I sent it in an email.
Yeah, I did get it.
But I think I can send it from my computer to the chat right now.
So Nicole, what practice, because I got the copies, but it didn't really say unless I didn't look carefully enough. What practice test is
76,
this?
so you have it.
Okay.
That's what we're doing. I'm gonna send that to.
I printed off from your link, but I didn't get what practice test it was, so.
Yep, no worries. I try to make stuff easier, and then sometimes I confuse myself by making it easier. Okay, LSAT. All right, classes. 10/31/20 reading comp homework. Yes. Okay, I just sent it to the group. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to break into groups, and this one has quite a few paragraphs, so it's a great one to practice on. And we're going to practice sitting on a sentence. So what this means is you read a sentence and you explain to your group what it means. And we're going to go paragraph by paragraph, and you're going to rotate in your group. So we have 9 people, so we're going to have 3 groups of 9, and we're going to take we could take like 6 to 7 minutes to do it. That would be great, so we can really get into the questions today.
Okay.
I have to assign our breakout groups, assign manually, because I want to make sure I put people that were here last time in those. Okay, so we'll do Angelica, and then here we'll do Derek and Gina, and 3 we'll do Cora and Jaylene. Okay. Okay, Angelica, we can give you Katie and okay, so in a second, you're going to get a notification to go to a breakout room, and go ahead and accept that.
Bye.
Yeah, bye. See ya.
music of France.
Hi. Were you able to join your breakout group?
Sorry, say it again.
Were you able to join your breakout group?
Yeah, so I had an appointment and I was rushing back from the appointment and I joined on my.
Do you see where it asks you to join?
Yeah, so I was in chorus just now on my phone, but I wanted to be on my laptop so I can work.
Perfect.
Yeah. So.
Okay, perfect. I was making sure. So you're able to. Are you good? Okay.
Yeah. So but can you add me back to chorus though? Because
I think I did. You were there. I think you just have to accept it somehow.
I accepted it on my phone, but I just left it.
I have you. Hold on. Let me see. I'm gonna try moving you to 1, but ignore that. I'm gonna move you back to 3. Okay, now try.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, of course. Zoom recording. Okay. All right. So after we read a passage, that's what I call actively or engaging with the text. Obviously, we want to get faster at it, but it's really important that we practice doing this slow as well so we can become better readers. I have on my website, there's a link, I can send it out for those that don't have it, where it's a reading comp drill. And I would do one of those like 4 times a week where I would do one individual passage where I would just focus on my reading and engaging with it and just to become a more creative or engaged or active reader, which is what we just did. So after I get done reading a passage, the 3 questions I ask myself are, the first one is, what is the main point? And I think about when I think about the main point, I ask, what did the author want me to know? If we struggle with main point questions, oftentimes it's because we're trying to summarize it rather than, if there's one thing that the author wanted you to walk away with, what is that one thing? The second thing I ask myself is, what is the tone? Is the author for it, against it, neutral but more positive? I like to think of it as a 1 to 5 star system, like where 1's very negative, 5's positive, and 3's neutral. Just so I kind of know in my head when I get to those tone questions, I know, are we ecstatic about it or are we just positive? Like, I think there's a difference between those two. And the last question I ask myself, and I do this loosely, I think some people spend a lot of time thinking about this, but I loosely say, how does my author get to that main point? Does he or she share background information? Do we go back and forth? Does he use examples? Does he ask a question, etc.? So let's go ahead and take 2 minutes just on a piece of paper or in your head, answer those 3 questions silently. All right, who wants to handle the first one? What is our main point?
Can I try?
Of course.
That there's this guy named this musician named Schoenberg who he really impacted and changed like an entire genre of music, and the author compares him to be on the level of Beethoven even. And he did this by, like altering different types of techniques and things like that.
Who agrees with her?
Cora? I do. Yeah, because I just put a little bit more simpler, but it pretty much exactly what, is it Evie?
Ebby, yeah.
I'm going to get this, I promise.
It's okay.
So I just said proof Schoenberg music is just as good as Beethoven, but I was on that same path.
I love it. You were on the right path, Ebby, right? Ebby. Ebby. Now I'm doing the opposite. Ebby. I'm gonna write it down. I love how Cora simplified it. Where at the end of the day, which I think you were there, but you added additional detail. Whereas, like, what was the point? That this musician is as good as Beethoven.
Okay.
Or showing you why. Would you agree with that or disagree?
Yeah. I would agree with
Right.
that.
Who wants to handle tone? What was the author's tone?
I can talk about it.
Yeah,
if that's
Jasmine.
okay. We've discussed, I believe he doesn't completely understand or agree with Schoenberg music, but he respects it. What do you think?
What does our class think? Do we agree, disagree?
I think he's just neutral.
I thought it was neutral positive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought he really liked him because these were like awe-inspiring and things like that.
Like in
So I thought it was like enthusiastic.
the last paragraph definitely shows strong author tone, but then like for that like sounds pretty neutral. So I don't know, like I'm between like neutral.
Yeah, like neutral, but he respects it because of
I like when you said neutral positive or neutral respect. I would say it leans positive, but it's not
negative.
He's not, and like I think maybe
3.5 stars.
3.5. No, I love that. Where I'm coming in is heavy is he's not as biased. Like it's not like this is his best friend that he's writing about and a Susie. Like we all need to agree with this. I think he's like we have more of a not biased perspective analyzing it.
Mm-hmm.
To me, how I looked at it was when the author first introduced both Beethoven and Schoenberg, or the assumption that we kind of know who they were. It's like, okay, Beethoven's well known. We all know who he is. And it took years for him to become so popular. And here comes this new guy named Schoenberg coming into the picture. Now the author slowly introducing him into the passage. And then from there, going into the different areas of what he's done from his technique and then how he's evolved, et cetera, et cetera. So it's more of an introduction at first because you can't compare him to the great of Beethoven initially from what I read from the first from the first paragraph. And then slowly he starts concentrating more on Schoenberg.
I love that. That's awesome, Derek. Shocker. I mean, like Derek, you have like these deep thoughts that are awesome. Your reasoning is so great. It's just like I bet you probably understand more than you get questions right. Which is not like that's the point of the test, right? Getting questions right.
Yeah.
Derek just needs to have more confidence in himself because he's pretty damn smart.
Yeah, no, clearly. So
we're here to boost Derek's ego.
That's half the test. I'm writing I'll get to that in a second, never mind. Which of the following most accurately expresses the main point? One of the secrets to reading comp is loosely predicting your answers. Just like LR, these questions are written to trick you. We've already done this one, so everyone go ahead and answer question number 1. We've already predicted. And then once you have an answer, go ahead and put it in the chat. Does everybody have their own version of the passage so I don't have to go back and forth? Okay, great. Okay, did everybody just follow Katie on this one? Or did everybody answer it on their own?
I actually chose A when I did it at home this morning.
Okay.
So I think that's too where I struggle with this main point because I'm so used to looking at 1 or 2 paragraphs in the LR questions that whenever I get a whole, reading comp, it's trying to figure out what exactly I'm focusing in on.
Absolutely. So main point questions on RC. At the end of the day, yes, it's what's the main point of the article, but if you're debating between 2 of them, ask yourself, why did the author write this, for one? And two, to add on to what you just said, Trish, I think, Katie, we were talking about this yesterday. For those of us that struggle with main point questions, most of us either struggle with main point questions or referring to the passage, or we struggle with making inferences. I struggled with main point questions because I wanted to overanalyze everything and I couldn't focus in on like, oh, I'm really big on that. This is why the author wrote it. I would pick something too broad or way, way, way too specific. And a lot of people tell you that. And I struggled to understand what that meant until I started asking myself, why did the author write it? That is not about, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I've started doing the therefore, if I can narrow it down to two thoughts that I think it could be for conclusion, but still sometimes it doesn't work. So.
Right. And the main conclusion question is so important because for those of us that struggle with main conclusion questions, what we find ourselves doing is we do really well on the passages that we get the main conclusion right, and we bomb the passages that we don't because it gears us off.
Right.
So I was someone that I would get like -1 or 2 on most passages, and then one I would miss 5. And like, how does that happen? And it was because I missed the main point, and then I started answering the questions differently because I based it off of this new main point that wasn't the correct main point.
Right.
Okay, so let's start with A. Why? So main point, we're asking us this question. The biggest thing on reading comp is when in doubt, go mild. And what that means is we do not, for those that were in the necessary assumption class, so many of these answer choices are wrong because they're too strong. Biggest tip to RC, when in doubt, go mild. But let's start with A. I'm just going to call him S. Though S's music is more widely appreciated today than when he was alive, it is still regarded by many as shrill and incoherent. Why is this one wrong? Or
Because
whenever you did this, did you say pass? I should say this. I always say love it, leave it, hate it. So if I hate it, I cross it off. If I love it, I put a dot next to it. And if I leave it, I just leave it blank. So I say love it, leave it, hate it, my first pass through. So I kind of know what my initial reaction was.
Would the still have made it wrong because it says still? Does that make it too strong?
No, this one I actually passed on the first time I read it.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest, I didn't love it though.
Oh, see, I hated it.
Okay, tell us.
I chose it.
You chose it? Sorry.
That's why.
I hated it because we didn't really talk about, there was no relevance to when he was alive versus when he was dead.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's strong enough for me to cross
Because
that
we
out.
didn't talk about his appreciation of his music. There was no when he died, his music became more popular. That wasn't even discussed in the.
That's great reasoning. Yeah, I would cross it off based off of that. All right, B, because of his accomplishments as a composer, S deserves to be as highly regarded as Beethoven.
Too strong.
Too strong. Yes, this is an example of being too strong. The author might think this, but is that the point of is that why the author wrote it? No. He could be respected. He might be in the same conversation as Beethoven, but to say he deserves to be as highly regarded is way too strong.
Okay, so just now when you asked us, what we thought the point was about, and then you later said that, oh no, it's really saying that this guy is as good as Beethoven, right? Because I had picked C, but when you said that, I was like,
oh, I misspoke. Okay, I get what you're saying when I narrowed it down. Okay. Yes, I said he's as good. Yes, that was my bad. I shouldn't have said it that loosely.
Okay.
Because of his accomplishments, and he deserves to be as regarded as Beethoven. I shouldn't have said it. So
I think B is a good trap answer because it did go into our predictions, but then after reading it, I was like, that's way too strong because we were saying as good as, we didn't say highly regarded, which I think they're two different.
I agree that they're different. And even though I said that, which I will work on you on how I word things sometimes, because I would have read this and I would have been like, oh, I would have recognized this as a trap answer just because of the strength. I'd be like, oh, I bet they're trying to trick me. as highly regarded. All right, C. Who picked C? All right, Katie, what did you like about C?
Well, for my like main point predictor, I had guessed.
Another comment on B. Sorry, another comment on B. I think the part that this is missing, which C has, we'll talk about in a second, is
I say that, yeah.
what was before. Like, what is the state? Like, his point is not just that he deserves to be as highly regarded. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. He does, but the whole point is like he's not regarded, he's not respected, he's not there, and this is why he should be. And so we're really missing that important piece in B as well, of it as it being too strong. All right, Katie, now C.
Yeah. So, for my main point predictor, I had said, well, first off, I called him Shu throughout the paragraph for my brain. And so I said, Shu's music has been criticized, but his advances in contribution respected. And so this was the one that I felt fit that the best. And so I chose it.
Awesome. Did anybody debate D or E?
Mm-mm.
Awesome. So some things I don't like about D is it says is most important for his invention, way too strong, way too narrow. And E, the point is not that Shu has not been accepted by Beethoven. It's that's true, but then we want to go on to why he should be respected. So I do think that B and C are the most attractive answers here, and especially because of my prediction that I said, I could see why B would be challenging. And when we narrow it down to two like this, one thing that we can ask ourselves is are both of these accurate? Let's say for the sake that we're going to say that B is accurate. Like, yeah, he is saying that. Which one is being used to support the other?
Yeah.
And whatever one is being used to support the other, the one that is being used to support the other, the one being supported is oftentimes our main point. So we use B to support C.
I've also heard like someone, I was in another class, and they said that like whatever the main point is should be touched on in every paragraph. So if like there's something that, you know, it could be true or must be true by the passage, but if it's not touched on in every single paragraph, then that means that the paragraphs are not used to support that point. So then it's not the main point.
I like that.
That's why D was
Like
easy.
that.
That's why D was easy to mark off, because it just talked about one small section.
Yeah.
Which I guess that would be why B is wrong then too, because okay, I like that. I'm gonna pay attention to it to make sure that it works, because I haven't seen. I mean, it makes sense that it would work, or at least like for something in the paragraph at least supports the main conclusion. Okay. I like that. Okay, so 2. Which one of the following could be said to be disturbing in a way that is most I can never say this word, analogous to the way that S's music is said to be disturbing in line 54? Who struggles with analogy questions? Or who takes a long time with them?
I skip them.
There we go. We have people skipping them. All right, so the trick to analogy questions is coming up with your own analogy. So if we go to line 54, and I have to read the question, I'm talking and thinking at the same time. Which of the following could be said to be disturbing? Could be said to be disturbing in a way that is most to the way that S's music is said to be disturbing in line 54. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to line 54. We're not going to read our answers. We're going to go to line 54. Oh, so I have to find it.
You want me to read it for you?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So 54, some of his work remains disturbing, not because it is incoherent, shrill, and ear-splitting, but because it unflinchingly faces difficult truths.
Okay, so what are we saying that why are we saying it's disturbing?
Because it faces difficult truths that earlier in the paragraph he talks about, like emotional states and that are not recorded before.
Okay. So I'm thinking, if I had to come up with my own analogy, not to get political, but this is the first one that came into my head. I'm thinking of that book, like Why It's Difficult for White People to Talk About Race. It's not that there's like a bunch of bad vocabulary in there that makes it uncomfortable, but it makes us face difficult truths. So that would be an analogy that I think would be similar to what we're saying here. Can anybody think of a different analogy that they could predict where it's like, oh, it's not the music, it's not it itself, but it's almost like the deeper meaning of it that hurts.
Right. It's not the really loud noises and the shrilling, disturbing ear splitting type of music, but it has to do with the lyrics, maybe touch base on suicide or depression or something that people don't want to talk about.
Excellent.
So it was more about the lyrics being disturbing rather than the sound of the music being disturbing.
Yeah, like the meaning being disturbing. So that's what we're looking for. So let's go to this. Everyone go ahead and answer this question and put your answer in the chat. Okay. All right. So we have a couple different answers here. So let's think about this. What was our analogy? What did we focus on in our analogy?
Talking about the meaning of difficult truths.
The meaning of difficult truths, something we don't want to hear. So for example, Derek said B or E. If we're going to narrow this down, E, does it matter that it's unfamiliar to us? In our own analogy, did we say anything about it being unfamiliar? No.
You just stated
I guess
that is something you don't
yeah,
like.
we said something that makes us uncomfortable because it's almost familiar, right? It's almost like a slap in the face of, oh, I don't want to talk, like what Gina said about suicide or depression. We don't want to talk about those things because awesome. I think that I could see where you're going to, where I said, like, oh, something that is unfamiliar might make us uncomfortable, but that's not the root of it. So if I was debating between B and E, that's where I would come to the difference. Trish, A, do you see the difference between A and B now? Do you see a comedian whose material relies heavily upon vulgar humor? Whenever we were talking about what?
Is it too strong?
No, is it the vulgar humor that makes people uncomfortable? Like, so in my book where I said, talk about race, it's not that it cusses a lot that makes us uncomfortable. Right. Well, it's the meaning behind it that makes us uncomfortable.
Got it.
B, a comedian whose humor shines a light on aspects of human nature many people would prefer to ignore. Absolutely. Why? Because
ignore. We don't want to talk about the bad stuff that happens in our life.
Does everybody see why B is was this easy to pick out? Was it almost like, stop, like, is this too easy when we think about it?
Yeah.
Okay. The author begins with a quote from K, primarily in order to. Primarily is such a strong word on the LSAT. It means number one. It primarily, so many answer choices are wrong on reading comp because of the word primarily. But once again, we're going to go back to the quote, read it and predict. Why do you think the author uses this? The reason we're predicting answers is these answer choices are written to confuse us. They're written for us to fail. So we have to trust our own gut almost when we read through them. So we don't get confused debating between a bunch. So can someone go ahead and read the quote for us?
I can for you. It's going back to the second paragraph. This, I'm going to read the whole paragraph. I mean, it's only like a couple of lines. So this remark aptly characterizes the reaction of many listeners to the music of Schoenberg. But this particular criticism comes from the pen of the dramatist August von K. Kotzebue, written in 1806 about the overture to Beethoven's opera Fidelio. And so right there, that's the compare. He's starting to compare. So this remark is going back to the quote of the music being shrilling and incoherent.
To who?
Only to August. Only to August von K.
No, I think it says it's how many listeners thought of it.
Okay, comes from the pen.
I have a question.
Yeah, it's many listeners, but the pen, the August VK is the one who wrote it. But,
right. But I'll take your question 1 second, Angelica. What I was getting at was, like the reason that I thought that we used this quote by this August is to show us how people, what people thought of his music. Many people thought of their music. Yes, Angelica?
Oh, no, I was just going to ask, is the quote that we're talking about here the first paragraph?
Yes, the quote's the first paragraph, but the second paragraph explains the quote to us, why, like what the quote means.
Okay.
Do you see, because it says this remark?
Yeah, I just wasn't sure when Cora started reading, because like I wanted to go to the first paragraph, so I wasn't sure if I was off track.
Nope, you're perfect.
Me,
all right.
Sorry.
I'm sorry?
I was going to say, when reading this question and then reading the quote from the start, where the author was trying to introduce this, it almost confuses the reader to feel like, okay, first, why is he talking about never was anything as incoherent, shrill, and chaotic and ear-splitting produced in music? And then he goes on to introduce Schoenberg, who is basically a no one, a nobody compared to Beethoven, and then going on to start to sing his praises and introduce him in that sense. And then later on in the passage, toward the end, where he says, he repeats basically the same phrase, some of his work remains disturbing, not because it's incoherent, shrill, and ear-splitting, but because it unflinchingly faces difficult results. That, to me, right there, it's almost like one part when he first introduced it, it made you think, who is he talking about? And then
what do they call that? A hook. The writer uses a hook.
Yeah, it confuses you at the start, and then he slowly introduces him and then builds him up and then says, wait a minute, here's the cliffhanger. Here's what happened. And this is so
go ahead and answer. No, you're spot on, Derek. Everyone go ahead and answer question 3. Put your answer and then put a dash and put what your second choice would be. So we're going to go back to this. These are, a lot of people struggle with these types of questions because there's 2 steps to them. The first one is understanding what we're talking about, and the second is understanding why the author included it. So what the quote is which we said is what that description of that author is saying, how people interpreted their music. But the most important part of this, when it says in order to, why do we include this quote of them? It's not, what is the purpose of it? How does this help us get to our argument? And we include that to show you, I think, when we go into the contrast of what he really is or what he really represents. So for those of us that said B, where did you go wrong in that?
We don't know if it's accurate.
I would say it's not accurate. The author would say that what is said above in that quote is completely not what Schoenberg is.
Right.
He's so much more than that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I think we got to the first, I think we entered that first question, but that second part, primarily the author included this why. Does the author think that that's an accurate account? No. I thought, okay, I'm on Derek's page where I thought D and E were the most tempting answers. But we had a lot of people pick C. So Cora, what did you like about C?
So like when I was reading it, I was like, okay, C. So because that going back to that paragraph, he did a little bit of comparison to Beethoven. So then I was like, I'm going to hold C. And then I read D and I'm like, no, I like D. So C and D were my like back and forth only because I was, on C, there were some comparisons of Beethoven.
I'm on the same boat with her. Like that's one of the reasons why I like C.
Is why, I'm sorry, Jaylene?
I'm on the same boat as her. That's one of the reasons why I was attracted to C. But I don't know about the uneven quality part like that.
Yeah, and did you notice the Beethoven? You ever pick C? Did we include this to talk about Beethoven's quality?
Yeah.
Do you think that we included this quote to show that, hey, even Beethoven can be range in quality?
I mean, I thought the author was trying to say that, like even Beethoven, like such a well-known artist or musician, can. I mean, I don't know about the uneven quality part either.
Sorry. Okay, so let's go back to this text here. It says, this remark aptly characterizes the reaction of many listeners to the music of Arnold Schue. But this particular criticism comes from the pen of the dramatist August, who's writing about Beethoven. So yes, we are right when we said that Beethoven, like we're using it to show like, hey, even Beethoven can do this. But are we using Beethoven? Are we using the Beethoven example to just show that even Beethoven can do it, or are we using it to say as our bottom line for Schue?
For Schue.
We're using it to Schue. We're saying like, hey, even though Beethoven can do this, the main point of why he does not include this to prove to us that Beethoven has uneven quality, right? He uses it to say that because Beethoven might have uneven quality, Schue can also be misrepresented as well. But I'm also looking at
the quote doesn't apply to Beethoven though.
Well, it is. It's
about Beethoven.
It's about Beethoven. The quote, it says that's where this question is hard. It's from the pen of the dramatist August, writing in 1806 about the overture to Beethoven's opera. So the quote is about Beethoven, but our author is saying that quote can also be used to describe the many listeners of Schue's music. But I agree with you, Derek, in the sense that we don't include it to talk about Beethoven. We include it to have some type of principle or some type of, what's the right word? Some type of comparison, so we can compare Schue to something. The thing that we're comparing is Schue. The thing that we care about is Schue. Beethoven just happens to be the guideline. And I don't think it suggests that the quote itself does not suggest that Beethoven has uneven quality. From that alone, we would just think Beethoven sucked. Like, would you agree with that?
I thought that part was going back to that Beethoven also had like shrilling and ear piercing music. So that
right, but that alone would just mean that he's bad. Where does the quote say Beethoven is good? So where does the uneven quality come in? there is no uneven quality.
I don't like C anymore anyway. Like I've changed my
She's like, I'm not debating it. Okay. So why do we include this quote? It's to show us that music that is at first seen as alienated may not seem alienating later. So something at first here, you're like, oh, that, blah, but then when you start listening to it, it's like, oh, this is awesome.
Yes.
Well, why the word alienating? Like alienating means
you.
Sorry?
To confuse you.
Yeah, that's why I didn't like it. I didn't like the alienating. I was like, ugh.
Like, how is that relevant?
So, okay, so to translate this, it's saying to show that music that might first be not alienating, be a turnoff or be like you like don't like, you might like more later.
It's an interesting use of the word alienating.
Oh, I guarantee so many people miss it. This is a harder passage, for sure, because there's so like you have to really understand what's happening, and the word choices are awful. All right, so everyone, go ahead on your own, answer 4, 5, and 6 on your own, and really work on making predictions before. I'm going to see if all these are prediction kinds. Okay, I'm going to tell you how to predict before you do it. So on question 4. How I predict these answers is I just loosely tell myself, what does Beethoven and S have in common? I don't say them all. I just kind of try to remember I don't go back to the passage, just from in my head, what do I remember? And I think about that so I can quickly cross them off. For 5, I would ask myself, what do I know S really likes about music? And for 6, I would ask myself, what is the relationship between the 3 styles before I even read the answer choices? And let's go ahead and take like 4 minutes to answer these.
That was my prediction.
Yeah, no. And then, okay, and then what answer choice did you say?
D.
How easy was that after that prediction?
It was easy.
Excellent. No, absolutely. But the depiction of emotional states had never been captured in music before. That's not the wording I would use. And if I didn't predict an answer, I don't think D would stick out to me as much because it's worded so fancy that I don't talk like that. So I might be afraid to pick it.
It was a toss-up between C and D for me because of the 12th tone that he initially talked about and then went to the emotional states at the end.
All right, so how do we determine which one is the most important?
I went back to the passage, and when he talked about the emotional states, he mentioned that that's what made him essential.
Yes, he uses the word, what makes S's music essential is that he precisely delineated, I don't know the word, recognizable, and sometimes disquieting emotional states that music has not recorded before. It literally tells us that that's what's essential. But Derek, if you narrow it down to 2 and you go back and just have to check those 2, look how much time you save from not having to check all of them. All right. I thought this was the hardest question out of all of them. And so before I got there, I asked myself, what was the relationship between the 3 styles of music? Before I read this one I had to go back for because I couldn't remember. And I went back and read it, and it says, the one from the, I didn't see much of a connection between the first and the second, to be honest. But the one thing that I really pointed out was it said that his view, it was the next inevitable step. So I was just like, oh, so he kind of starts off broader and just gets more specific was what my preface was. I didn't know at all what these answer choices were what direction they were going to go. And now that I'm trying to share my preface while knowing what the answer choices say. But when I was looking at it, I was like, it's almost like he was a broad genre and just got more specific as he advanced. Go ahead and put your answer choices for this one in the chat.
Yeah, I thought this one was fairly easy, although I might have gotten it wrong. So I don't want to say that until I know for sure what the answer is.
All right, you're like, okay. So let's look at, we have a lot of people saying C. And I read this one and I read the first one. Each successive style represents a natural progression from the previous one. And I was like, I don't know. I'm like, that's weird. And then I read the second one. Each successive style represents an inexplicable departure from the previous one. I immediately crossed B out because of that one. The only line I really remembered was, it was it undeniable? It was an inevitable step towards the third one.
Right.
Between 2 and 3, it was inevitable. Like it had to happen. So I crossed B off.
Oh.
And C, I crossed off for the same reason, because it's saying the third style was inexplicable departure from the second. And I think the second to the third was really smooth.
Yeah, that's not how I read it.
Yeah.
So can I
my
say
question-
what I thought about C?
Yeah.
So that paragraph where he says, finally, he developed the 12-tone technique. So the 12-tone technique was the third step. And he says that it was a means of bringing a new system of order to the non-tonal, which was the second step. So I felt like it was making it seem like he was not abandoning, but he was like adding the order that he took away.
I thought he was making a distinction between the second and third as well. Like that's why I picked C. Is I read it differently than you read it, Nicole. Like I read it like Evie did, where the 12 tone was standing out from the first and the second.
Mm-hmm.
Can I say something on this one?
No.
Go ahead, Derek. Show us your wisdom.
Okay, if you read the passage, lines 31 through 37, I think, Schoenberg later pushed through these unstable harmonies until they no longer had tonal basis. It's almost like he progressed from one stage and went on to the next and onto the next until he became, until the music became splitting and whatnot. To me, that was the what A symbolizes. Each successive style represents a natural progression from the previous one. That's how I read it.
Yeah.
But C says that too. C says that went from 1 to 2 was a natural progression, but then 3 was the departure.
But then you're limiting the style to one specific style. But he went from a natural progression from one to the other without saying a certain stage of it.
My pre-phrase for this was first style harmony, second style disordered harmony, third style second style was chaotic disordered harmony, and then third style was organized chaotic disordered harmonies. So that kind of helped me get to A, but I was stuck with D for a while. I think just because the last 3 answers look so similar that I was thrown off, like, oh, they're trying to trick you, so it has to be one of like these formats. And so it made me doubt A, but I couldn't fit my like pre-phrase into one of those 3, so I chose A. Because I felt like each one maintained, transformed, and also he, in the paragraph, said he's so obsessed with like furthering the future and the progress of music. So that's what made me choose A as opposed, but C, D, and E were just hard because like the phrasing and the formatting was so rough and they're so similar. It made you think it had to be one of those 3.
I 100%, your explanation was spot on. When I asked myself, what is because I knew a change happened, and I was like, but was he departing? And the only thing I could think about was like when Taylor Swift went from country to pop. Like that was an inexplicable departure, right? Like, but then I thought about it real quickly. I was like, wait, but she did kind of have that album in between where she was in between, and I was like, so really, did she do that? And like, what would be an inexplicable departure? I think that would be going from one genre completely to a different, and that never happened. Where I couldn't, so how I really got to the answer was I couldn't, if I had to say that, where was it at? The second style represents a natural progression from the first. And I felt like if I had to choose between C, D, and E, then there couldn't even be a change because I couldn't see the change in the text either.
Right.
Wait, repeat that. Say that one more time.
When I was looking at C, D, and E, for me to accept one of these answer choices, I feel like I had to also accept a different part of another one that I couldn't see. Even though C, D, and E, I wanted to pick one of them. Naturally, I did, but I couldn't, like kind of what Katie said, I couldn't make one fit. So I'm like, well, maybe there just isn't a change. And that's how I ended up going with A. Because really, which one do you think is the inexplicable change? If you had to say one, what's the inexplicable change?
I thought the third one, but I guess
I screwed up.
I thought, okay, I was the opposite. I thought if there was one, it would have had between 1 and.
I would have guessed 1 and 2 would have been the inexplicable change because 3 organized the second.
Yes, I agree. And it says it's the inevitable step that he had to take. So I crossed off from that. E, B, C, I crossed off B, C, and E, and then I decided between A and D. Can we see why it's a natural progression? I think the biggest question here is when it says inexplicable departure. Can everyone hear how strong that is?
Yeah, I was about to say that.
And ask yourself, was this an inexplicable departure truly? Does he divorce everything he knows?
He was building.
He was building.
He built, yeah.
Yeah, because everything was building on from the one previous.
It was changing, absolutely.
Yeah.
But
if
it wasn't.
C and D actually proves A. Like you can't have C and D if A is not true because it was a progression in each one of those steps.
Yeah.
Music.
I don't like this question. I'm just gonna.
No, this is a very, whenever Gina said it was easy, I was like, this is a really hard question.
Well, like I said, I misread it. I'll throw myself under the bus. I'll show my cockiness and then eat my humble pie.
Like, I thought that's what they say though. Sometimes when people think the test was too easy, they're like, it was just too easy because people did it they had such a baseline level of knowledge, they didn't realize how tricky the questions really were.
Well, because you have to be very careful because when I read it, when you asked it to do predictions, I just predicted that there was an even flow between the first style and the second style. And then all of a sudden he switched it up on the third with a 12-tone bass versus he wasn't dealing with just I don't know what it went in. Anyway, that's in my mind when I read it the first time, that's how I was reading it, is that he went from his first style, which then led to his second style. And then all of a sudden his third style, he took a left instead of a right. And
the big one, I think that it's just the word inevitable. Like that word is what,
yeah,
it had to happen.
And I didn't pay attention to that word.
Okay.
I was probably thinking too much about the food that Derek was showing us last night in our study group. So I kind of
So,
Derek is quite the cook.
real quickly, we're going to read the third one together, but I wanted to share, I am trying to capture more like content for people that's like, just encouraging, etc., etc. I didn't put these in the right order. 4, 5, 6, 3, here. Okay. So if anybody is interested in writing a blog post about their LSAT journey or tips or something that they've learned, I'm giving out free classes for it. So Angelica wrote one and she talked about regrouping from August flex to November. And so all you have to do is write like 200 to 300 words, anything that you think could be helpful, just send it to me in a Word document and I'll do all the blog posting, but I'm just trying to share.
Like, do your research before paying thousands of dollars on these courses.
Right. No, the goal of it is like just pick something. So I just wrote one on like overcoming, like what I posted on the group about LSAT fatigue. I'm writing one about like overcoming shame on the LSAT. Anything that you've used, like tips for overcoming test anxiety, just something that you think would be helpful. If you want, you don't have to write one by any means, but if you would like to, I just want to give more people a voice of sharing and like use this as a place where it can be helpful. Once again, you don't have to by any means, but I think a lot of people have really good ideas that just we're like I want, and people post them on Facebook and stuff, but then they're gone and you don't get to keep them and then search for them. And I'm like, oh, I wish I could still have this and reference it because it's so good. All right, so let's go on to the second passage. I'm going to read the first paragraph, and then we'll have someone read the second and third, and then we're going to do the questions on our own. So I'll go ahead and start reading this one. So the following passage was adapted from a law journal article published in 1998. All right. Industries that use biotech are convinced that intellectual property protection should be allowable for discoveries that stem from research and have commercial potential. Okay, so industries that use biotech think that intellectual property protection should be allowable. So what is intellectual property protection? I had to think about this for a second.
IP, that's what protects, like when you invent something. So it's all for people who are doing any kind of inventions, and it's protecting, it could be
the patent, yes.
Right, the patents.
There should be allowable for discoveries that stem from research and have commercial potential. So essentially, like, I think that there should be some type of protection for my research. All right. Biotech researchers and academic institutions increasingly share this view because of their reliance on research funding that is in part conditional on the patentability of their results. Okay, so biotech researchers and academic also agree with this because of their need for funding. However, questions about the extent to which biotech patenting is hindering basic research have recently come to the forefront. And the patenting and commercialization of biotech inventions are now the focus of increased scrutiny by scientists and policymakers. Whoa, that's like a 5-line sentence. But we're saying that people are now questioning, is this patent hurting us? And these patents and the ability to like commercialize these inventions are the focus of increased scrutiny by scientists and policymakers. So scientists and policymakers are scrutinizing these people for these patents. My first question after reading this is why? Like, what is bad about patenting this? I'm questioning it. I'm being curious. Why? And this is a paragraph that it's short and you think it would be easy to read, but I spent about a minute and 20 seconds reading this paragraph the first time, because if I didn't understand what some of these words were or what they were trying to break it into, I would struggle with the rest of this. But I actually read the rest of this passage pretty quickly since I spent so long on the first paragraph. Who would like to read the second paragraph? We'll have you do half of it. Who wants to read? Cora, do you want to read until
Sure.
like,
read to where?
I'll make a line, but you just start.
Okay. So the perceived threat to basic research relates to restrictions on access to research materials, such as genetic sequences, cell lines, and genetically altered animals. These restrictions are seen as arising either from enforcement of a patent right or through operation of a contractual agreement. Some researchers—
Explain this to us so far. What is happening?
Okay. So this is going back to the why, this perceived threat. of basic research relates to restriction. So when you put patents out there, it's restricting, it's going to restrict other upcoming people that are trying to also do inventions as well. That's what I get out of it.
No, perfect. Keep going.
And then it gives you examples that, you know, the genetic sequence, those are just examples of all this up and coming technology or what these other entrepreneurs are doing. And then it talks about these restrictions are seen as arising either from enforcement of a patent. So enforcement of a patent could literally mean like you're up and coming entrepreneur and then you're going to your patent attorney and they find this other patent that's out there and they're like, no, guess what, you can't do it. Or you're getting sued. That's what I got out from that enforcement of the patent. So enforcement of the patent right or through operation of contractual agreement. Again, that's just going through, you know, understanding that when you're up and coming, there's so much process that goes on between you and your patent.
Yeah,
the people that
these
you're getting
patents are holding us back, right? That's what I got from it. Patents are holding us back or holding people from access. Excellent.
And I mean, and I can see where they're going with this. They're like how these patents are, you know, if you patent everything, entrepreneurs that are constantly thinking of new and improved things are going to be held down.
Absolutely. I was just thinking from like a medical perspective. But anyways, all right, continue.
Okay. Some researchers fear that patenting biological materials will result in the patent holders attempting or threatening to adjoin further research through a legal action for patent infringement. And this right here goes back to that thought process of being sued. If you are or going through that whole process of being sued, that fear of like, hey, I want to, like you said, biological materials is medical. So you're coming up with, maybe it's a cure for cancer or something like that. And your cure that you're trying to build is somebody else's very similar patent that they've already got out there, and that they might sue you for it.
Awesome. Katie, can you read the second half of the paragraph?
Sure. Okay. In other instances, a patent holder or the owner of biological materials may refuse to make such materials available to scientists conducting basic research unless a costly materials transfer agreement or license agreement is undertaken. So another potential issue with patents is that the owner of the patent it will disrupt the power dynamic. So if someone has a patent for these materials, they could just refuse to let other people use it, even if they're using it for research, unless they use that to get a ton of money or other things. For example, the holder of a patent on unique biological materials may want to receive a benefit or compensation for the costs invested in the creation of the material. So if they own it, they're going to want a percentage of the research of the product. Academic researchers who oppose biotechnology patents fear that corporate patent holders will charge prohibitively high fees for the right to conduct basic research involving the use of patented materials. So people opposing it are afraid that patent holders are going to monopolize these materials and it's going to make it harder and more expensive for people just to conduct basic research because of these patents.
Fabulous.
Thanks.
And then Gina, can you do the first half of this paragraph? And Abby, will you do the second half when she?
Oh, Gina's muted.
Oh, never mind. Oh,
Okay.
Are you good now? Okay.
Yeah, I'm good now, except for I lost where you were.
Oh, we're at the top again. I just put it on different slides.
Okay. So while it is true that communal tradition of freely sharing research material has shifted to a market model, it also undoubtedly true that even in the early days of biotechnology, some researchers took measures to prevent competitors from gaining access to materials they had created. So if I can understand this correctly, is that even though they've changed the way in which they share material based upon communal traditions versus a market model, they're in the old way, they could still prevent competitors from gaining access to the material just as they can now. Did I miss something there?
Doing great.
Okay. Scientists who resist the idea of patenting biotechnology seem to be confusing patent rights with control of access to biological material. They mistakenly assume that granting a patent implies granting the right to deny access. So they just say that they're confusing the difference between patenting something and then not allowing people to have access to it in order to use for other types of advancement.
Excellent.
In reality, whether a patent could or would be enforced against a researcher, particularly one conducting basic and non-commercial research, is questionable. So it's like creating a more correct assumption about what a patent does. And it's saying that the idea that like someone could deny access is questionable. First, patent litigation is an expensive endeavor and one usually initiated only to protect a market position occupied by the patent holder or an exclusive patent licensee. So it's giving one reason why the assumption is questionable and likely mistaken. And that reason is because it's really expensive. Second, there has been tradition among judges deciding patent cases to respect a completely non-commercial research exception to patent infringement. So it's giving a second reason. And that's like there's a tradition amongst judges in making these decisions within litigation that doesn't always favor the patent holder. Moreover, it is likely that patents will actually spur rather than hinder basic research because patents provide scientists with a compelling incentive to innovate. So it's actually saying that rather than the idea that patents like inhibit research, it actually might, incite more research. Researchers know that patents bring economic rewards as well as the degree of licensing control over the use of their discoveries. And the reason it might incite research is because they're economic rewards.
Awesome. All right, so we're running a little bit behind on time. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna break you into two groups. I'm gonna put the dinosaurs in a group and the young ones in the group. And we're gonna answer these questions. You're gonna have 6 minutes to work together and we're gonna come back and talk about them, okay?
Okay.
Little competition to end our.
Thanks, Cora, for labeling us, by the way. Can't we be called gems or,
Oh, I know. It's like, now I'm like, it's stuck. Maybe
Maybe
next
we go back and buy some beauty cream to make sure that my skin isn't like chapping like a dinosaur.
Chapping like a dinosaur. Okay, then how do I get to the breakout rooms? Oh, here we go. Okay. Jasmine, Katie. I just need to add. So you're gonna go to 2. Red's gonna go to 2. Jaylene's gonna go to 1. And 1. Okay, are you able to go to your rooms now?
Nothing popped up.
Nothing
Yeah.
popped up.
Oh yeah, if you click on join breakout room down at the bottom, the little window will pop up, Cora.
Okay, got it.
Awesome.
We're in room 2.
Bye.
I don't see it.
I will add you. Hey, don't click that one. Don't click that one.
Okay.
Don't click that except the new view. There. Oh no, not that one either. Hang on. 2. Do you see it now?
Where is it?
Do you see it at the bottom right, maybe?
I've got 3 screens here and I don't see it popping up at all.
Okay, go to do you have like the Zoom up large?
Oh, let's see, Zoom.
Do you have me minimized? If so, make me large again.
The camera picture or what?
Yeah, see it at the bottom right, like wherever your toolbox is or like your tasks.
Okay, just 1 second, Nicole. I had it earlier. I mean, when we did it earlier in the breakout room, this time it didn't pop up. Oh, there it goes. Wait, let's see. Oh, that just says invite.
Yeah, hit accept.
Breakout rooms. Okay.
I wanted to show you guys my Ardella's Halloween costume.
Look it. Which one is she gonna wear?
Well, we did them for different events. This
I
one,
like Lady Liberty.
we did that. Yeah, that one's funny because like her Instagram is like leadership quotes. You should follow her on Instagram, Della the Doodle. But we were, I was a spider and she was a pig, and we did Charlotte's Web for a kids reading that we did at the library.
Oh my god.
Oh yeah, she's cute. She did not. We had to practice though. This picture's from practicing, so I had to put it on her head for like 10 minutes every day for like a month to get her to keep it, like not swat at it.
That's so cute.
She looks so mad. She hates me sometimes. Here, I'll show you guys her. She's like, Mom, it's Saturday. We're supposed to be out hanging out at the park. Yeah. Anyways, okay, so both groups got all of them correct. So congratulations. But the young group is definitely getting the $5 off because they finished like 10 minutes beforehand.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, we named ourselves the Feed
The
Eye.
feed eye.
Wow. So how did I get moved to the other group? I just want to know.
Poor Jasmine got put in the old group.
I know.
But congratulations. But I think the ones that we need to go over are 7, 12, and 13. Does everybody agree with those three numbers?
Yes.
All right, what was the main point of the passage? All right, so Katie, what was your prediction here?
So I predicted that it would be something along the lines of, while there is debate about whether or not biotechnology patents should be used, overall, we believe, or they should, or at least to the very least, like
there's a place for them somewhere.
Yeah, like they should be there. And so I just felt D was the one that best aligned with that.
Yes. All right. So let's look at A. By commercializing the research enterprise, biotech patents threaten the progress of basic research in the biosciences. This is definitely true, but it's, too narrow. Because is our author, does they write this just to tell us about the threat that biotech has? Or is it to express like, hey, I hear you and I hear these concerns, but we also need to see why we have them in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love Ebby, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Ebby. I love her comment that she made in the last passage of every passage should at least support this a little bit. And I think I did that on this one to check it. And I was like, ooh, A, every passage does not support A.
Yeah.
Or every paragraph. Are we good on this one? All right. Cora, can you read number 12?
All right. The passage provides the strongest support for inferring which one of the following. And Jasmine did a really good thing. She was like, she heard that anytime you want to infer, I can't say that word, sorry, do it as a must be true. So
yes, because what does infer mean on the LSAT?
Yeah.
What does infer mean on the LSAT?
Most strongly supported.
No, conclude.
Conclude.
I grew up at a time, like when we grew up or in school, I feel like we learned that an inference is an educated guess. On the LSAT, it is not an educated guess. It's like beyond educated. It's like valid. It's a valid claim.
Yeah.
And so for these ones, do we want I love that we said must be true. Do we want a strong or mild answer?
A mild.
Mild, yes. All right. So you can go ahead and walk us through this, Cora.
Okay, so going through the answers, policy makers are no less likely than academic researchers to favor new restrictions on biotechnology patients. I mean, that to me was an automatic, no less likely. I mean, it was a automatic no. I did not like it. B, most biotechnology, right there, that word most, was a big red flashing light. Holders believe that the pursuit of basic research in academic institution threatens, another big, strong word, their market position. So that was a no because of it's too strong. C, biotechnology researchers who work in academic institutions and oppose biotechnology patents are generally unable to obtain funding for their work. To me, this right here, I mean, at nowhere does it say generally unable to obtain funding.
Yeah, like more often than not. Are they more often than not unable to obtain funding for their work? We don't know.
Right. So I'm going to skip the correct answer and go to E. E, rapid commercialization in the field of biotechnology has led to a dearth of highly educated biologists willing to teach an academic institution. This one just made me laugh. And I'm like, where does it talk about this? It was
commercialization. Yeah.
Yeah. And then D, suing for patent infringement is not the only way in which patent holders can assert legal control over the use of their patented materials. And we went back to knowing they actually talked about 2 different ways. So we knew that it wasn't the only way. So that was we knew that was true.
And I love how, okay, so it has only in it, but this is actually a very weak answer because it's saying there's at least one other way.
Yeah.
It's not saying there's a lot of other ways. They're saying at least one. So that's very mild and not hard to prove. It doesn't take much for that to be correct. Excellent. All right. And then Evie, do you want to do number 12?
Yeah. I mean,
13.
Or 13.
13?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
13. Yes. So suppose a university researcher wants to conduct basic non-commercial research involving cell lines that are patented by a for-profit biotech corp. The author would be most likely to make which one of the following predictions. So A, the researcher will probably be unable to use the cell lines because the corporation holding the patent will demand a prohibitively high.
Sorry, 1 second, Evie, before you do that. Sorry. So I'm going to ask you this. So suppose a university researcher wants to conduct basic non-commercial research involving cell lines patented by a for-profit biotech corporation. What the author would be most likely to make which of the following predictions about their researcher's prospects? What did you loosely predict here?
So we looked at I looked at the third paragraph, and that if the patent already exists and but they still went ahead and did the research, and they were like sued or something, they probably, the litigation would be in their favor, or you know, like they also could be fined, you know, or like different things like that. Anything that was supported by that last paragraph.
All right, now go ahead and
Yeah.
mark the answer choices.
So A, the researcher will probably be unable to use the cell lines because the corporation holding the patent will demand a high payment for their use. I held on to this one.
I agree.
Yeah.
I left it open.
Yeah.
Okay.
B, the corporation holding the patent will probably successfully sue the researcher for patent infringement if she conducts the research without permission. I eliminated this one because of the second reason that's in the third paragraph, that judges usually favor non-commercial research. So like a university researcher. C, the university that employs the researcher will likely prohibit the research. I eliminated this one altogether because it doesn't talk about the university prohibiting the research. The researcher has a good chance of not being held liable. So I like this one again because of that second reason with the judge favoring them. And so I left that one open as well. And then E, the corporation will probably offer to fund the research if granted. And this one also eliminated because it says nothing about the corporation who has the patent funding the research by somebody.
Yeah, like, oh yeah, you can take our patent and we'll give you money.
Yeah, we'll give you money to do it. Yeah, that doesn't make sense. I went with D because it was directly supported by the passage, and also the good chance. I felt like that made it milder than A, where it says completely unable to use. So I went with D.
Yeah, and A says will demand a prohibitively high payment for their use.
Yeah.
That might happen, but we don't know it for sure will happen.
Yeah.
Which is why I eliminated A.
Mm-hmm.
I narrowed it down to A and D as well. And I said, D, must be true questions. I sometimes negate them. And I'm like, what if I said the researcher does not have a good chance of being held reliable? Or the researcher has a good chance of being held reliable for patent infringement if she, and that completely goes against the second point in the paragraph that you mentioned, where it would contradict. Awesome. All right, does anybody have any other questions on these? This is a big morning. Does anybody feel like they learned something?
Yes.
Yes, I definitely did.
Perfect. Let me set this.